Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show and welcome to this blast from the past in more ways than one. This episode today, I have for you a formerly exclusive YouTube video that I did on the Longbox Review YouTube channel. This is something that I recorded on May 26th, 2013. It was my first Google Hangouts on Air, which is just basically a live broadcast that I did on YouTube. But this was to talk about some specific comic books that evoke some sort of memories for me, some special recollections about some particular comics. And so I talked about those. I will apologize in advance to you because the audio quality is not that great. I was using a subpar webcam at that time, and you'll definitely notice a difference. But I ask your indulgence and forgiveness in advance, and I hope you enjoy the show. Let's see. I wanted to talk today about some specific comics. Specifically about comics that either have some specific impact on me in some ways, or something about those comic books have been embedded in me, in my memory, and have had some effect on me. Much of it's superficial. There are some things that are a little more important than others. We'll get to that. So I'm going to do this in reverse chronological order, and so I'll do some comics that are more recent and go back in time as I talk about them. And the reason I'm doing this is that I was listening to a podcast, and specifically an interview with Jim Lee that Kevin Smith was doing on the Fat Man on Batman podcast. And something that Jim Lee had said during that interview just sparked some memories in me. I can't remember exactly what he was talking about or what they were talking about, but for some reason I got this flash of memory about a particular comic book that I read a long time ago. And there are certain titles, certain issues that just have stuck with me because of these bits of memory, the way that they've embedded themselves into my past, into my memory. So I just kind of wanted to talk about those for some reason. Let's see. So first up, I have here Animal Man. This is from the 1988-89 series. I can't remember. I think it was 88. Anyway, this is by Grant Morrison with Chaz is it Trug or Truog doing the art. I'm not sure I pronounce that. As you can see, Dolphin, the female dolphin, whoops, right there in the white hair. And then there are dolphins on the cover. If you're not familiar with this story, Animal Man helps out a environmental activist or eco-terrorist, as he calls himself. Can't remember the character's name, but he's part of the Sea Devils. Anyway, they're trying to prevent the mass slaughter of these dolphins that go through this little seaside town. It's a pretty gruesome story from the standpoint of what they show in terms of the killing the dolphins, the townspeople. And of course, the townspeople don't like these outsiders, these superheroes coming into their town and telling them, "Hey, you shouldn't be doing that." But it's a nice little story, especially the bit where a particular dolphin, we get the point of view of a dolphin and how it sees mankind through its eyes, and the antagonist of the story ends up getting saved by the dolphin in the end. It's a nice little poetic wrap up of the story. The reason I chose to talk about this particular comic is that while there's nothing in this particular title or this particular issue about tuna, it was at the time that I read this comic, there was this big uproar about dolphins being trapped in tuna nets, and the fishermen and the processors not distinguishing between the tuna fish and dolphins. And so there was a big uproar back then about that. And basically, I stopped eating tuna fish for over a year because of this specifically because of this comic. So, I heard about the protests, the concern about dolphins being in tuna, in cans of tuna, and then I read this title, and I saw just the carnage of these fictional characters destroying these dolphins, and it just had an impact on me. And I decided that I would not eat tuna. And that lasted for a year. And the reason I started eating tuna after that year was over, essentially, was that because of the pressure from the public, the processors and sellers of canned tuna fish started changing their ways, their practices, and they even put on the labels of tuna fish that they were dolphin free. Now, they could be lying. They could have been lying back then. I did as much research as I could. This was pre-internet days, so it was limited. But this title was the first time that I can remember that a comic book affected me in a more or less political fashion. So that's why I wanted to mention this one. Next up, this is really stupid. In comparison to Animal Man and everything that went along with that issue, this one is really dumb. But as I was like I said, I was listening to that interview with Jim Lee, and I just had all these flashes of memory from this title to this title to this title. This is one of them. Here we go. This is Legion of Superheroes. This is number 305. This was about this. This is probably a little earlier than the Animal Man one. Hold on, let me check that real quick here. Let's see. It was published in cover date of November 1983. So we're jumping back a few years. But as you can see on the cover there, there's Shrinking Violet, the smoking Shrinking Violet after being zapped with something. You got the legs and feet of Brainiac 5, Colossal Boy, and looks like it's in pink, so it must be Element Lad in the background. And the story of this is they find out that the Shrinking Violet that's been part of the group for quite a while now actually isn't Shrinking Violet. It's a Durlan who took Shrinking Violet's place. But that story has nothing to do with why I chose this book to talk about today. I don't know if this is even possible to see. See these little ridges here on the back? That's damage that I did to the comic book because I bought this comic and a bunch of others. I went home. This is 1983. Sat down at the kitchen table and was reading my comics with a glass of Kool-Aid. Guess what I did? Yes, I spilled the Kool-Aid all over this comic. Probably more the backside. So, of course, I jumped up. Actually, I froze for a second. I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do? And then I jumped up, picked up the glass, grabbed some paper towels, just started cleaning things up. I moved the rest of the comics out of the way of this, and I think I splashed a little bit of Kool-Aid on one other comic. I don't remember which one it was. But this one got Kool-Aid on it. And then I basically went through page by page and was wiping it off very gently, trying to get all the Kool-Aid off of the affected pages. Yeah, I can see some damage now that I'm looking at it. So no longer near mint condition, but it was I hate to say it, it's kind of traumatizing to me that I did that. But I kept the issue. I actually bought a replacement, a better copy of it. But I kept this one. It's still readable, unless you're really looking or feeling the comic, you really can't tell. But anyway, that was one of the memories that popped into my brain as I was listening to that interview. Take another step back in time. So this comic was published in February 81 cover date. So that means it was probably late 1980 that it came out. But I did not get this comic at that time. I got this comic probably 82, maybe 83. This is New Teen Titans, number 4. See the Justice League of America on there. Now I'm gonna scooch this in and look at Batman there. Can you see his cape a little bit there? You see that? There's a tear there, and you can maybe you could just make out based on the reflection of the light. There's tape there, and you can also see that it's looks kind of beat up. It's a little wrinkled and doesn't look very good. Here, let me turn it around. You can see the backside. Oh, there you go. There, yeah. Now you can see the tape. Look at that tape job, and look, it goes all the way through the comic. So, funny story. I had bought this comic. It was my very first back issue that I bought because I was into the New Teen Titans, of course, back then, and I did not have this issue. And then I finally found it, and I paid more than 50 cents. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but I was really proud that I bought this issue because I was really getting into the idea of being a comic book collector, not just a comic book reader. And New Teen Titans was the first title where I had to buy them all. I love this title so much, so I bought them all. Eventually bought them all. But this was the first one. Okay, so how did it get tape all over it? And how did it get torn? I mean, and it was torn in half. Not by me. So the story is I screwed up. My parents were remodeling the house a little bit, and we were going to take out this one wall. We already knew that this wall was going to be done. Well, my younger brother, he's younger by a year and a half, almost a year and a half than me. I came home from school, and he was very excited. He's like, "Hey, watch this!" And he took a pair of scissors, and he threw them at this wall, and they stuck. And I thought, my first thought was, you should not be doing that. My second thought was, that's really cool. And then my third thought was, and then I said, give me the scissors. So guess what I did? One time, I threw the scissors, stuck in the wall, and I thought to myself, wow, I should not have done that. Anyway, fast forward to that evening, and my parents come home, and of course they see the damage and decide to teach us a lesson. My brother, who had just got an alarm clock, electronic alarm clock, they were new back then in 1982-ish or so. So my dad, in order to teach him a lesson, my dad took his prized alarm clock, took a hammer and a screwdriver and pounded onto it, breaking the plastic chassis of it, but it was still usable. So, that was bad. And then, so I'm sitting there watching this. I don't know why they punished my brother first and then me, but they did. And so I'm watching this unfold, and I think, oh my God, I know exactly what my dad's going to ask for. And he did. He asked for my New Teen Titans copy. And so I reluctantly brought it out and handed it to him with trembling hands. And he took it and he tore it in half right in front of me. It was like ripping my heart apart. And then he said that I had to throw it away. And so I did. And I went to my room, and I won't say that I cried, but I probably did. I really can't remember. All I remember was I was very upset. I was angry at myself, at my brother, at my father, but mostly myself. And then, I don't know, within the next hour or two, my mother came in and said that I could go get the comic out of the garbage, because she convinced my father that it wasn't fair that my brother got to keep his alarm clock that still worked, just had a crack in it, but I couldn't keep the comic. So I went and got it out, cleaned it up as best I could, and then I spent the next, I don't know, I must have spent 2 hours taping this sucker together. Yeah. Fun times. I believe this was the comic that I thought of immediately during that interview. I immediately went to this one, and then all the others popped up. So there you go. Next up, another New Teen Titans. New Teen Titans had a big impact on me as a younger comic book reader / collector. This is the annual #2 from 1983. This is the introduction of Adrian Chase as the Vigilante. And that wonderful George Perez art. Nice little, see the V pattern there? And Donna over here, and my favorite character, Dick Grayson, is Robin in there. So this was, why is this important to me? So there's this storyline in here where Robin goes on this crusade to basically bring down these gangsters, this particular gangster. And he's using the Titans to help him. And he thinks that Adrian Chase is dead. And I think that's the impetus as far as why he's doing this. But he's very driven. He's determined. He's almost Batman-like in his attitude, even with his friends, the Titans. But they do help him because that's what they do. They're friends, right? So why did I want to talk about this? Because I took this comic into 9th grade speech class because I believe the assignment was bring something in of yours that has a value to you, some sort of value to you, and explain why. And so I brought this comic in. Now you have to know that at that time, at that age, I was a very shy guy. I would not have done something like this back then. I would not open myself up like this. So comics were, nerds read comics, and nobody wanted to be a nerd back then, right? So for me to bring in a comic book and share with my peers and the people that would make fun of me potentially, that was a big deal. And I did that because this particular comic just affected me. If I remember correctly, what I said was the reason that I brought this in was that it represented justice to me, justice being done, and that was very important to me for some reason back then. It was just, the character of Robin was very important to me. I really don't remember much beyond that. This was a long time ago, 1983. So, wow, is that? Never mind. I'm not going to do math right now. I can't do math in my head like that. Anyway, it was just, I never did anything like that before, and actually probably since until I went to college and was in a class where comic books were being taught, or at least a few were. And I was able to discuss comics and my love for comics and how important they are to me and the impact that they have as a piece of literature. But back then, 9th grade, 1983, that was the beginning of that, I guess. And then here's one. It's another one featuring Robin. So there's kind of a sort of a thread going through here, I guess. But here we go. Brave and the Bold, featuring Batman and Robin, the ex-boy wonder, and you can see Batwoman in the background and the old Batmobile, and then Hugo Strange back there. So maybe some younger readers don't know this. That's the Robin of Earth 2, the old Earth 2, the pre-52 Earth 2. So this is Brave and the Bold number 182. You can see that awesome Jim Aparo art. I love Jim Aparo's Batman back in the day. But this is a story about Batman. I don't remember how it happened exactly, but Batman ended up on Earth 2 interacting with his, well, not his, but his Earth 2 counterpart's former protege, and Batwoman thrown in for good measure, fighting against Hugo Strange. But really what this the story was about was so they have to, excuse me, they have to defeat Hugo Strange. That's the basic plot of it. But what was really important about this issue, the plot of it, was how Robin dealt with Batman. And so it's a weird juxtaposition, because you have Robin, who is a grown man on Earth 2, and his mentor is dead, and yet here he is dealing with a younger version of his mentor, but it's not his mentor. And Batman's dealing with the idea that this is Robin, and so he usually orders Robin around and tells Robin what to do, but this is not his Robin. This is a grown man who is, he does his own thing and doesn't need Batman to tell him what to do. So it just is this really cool interaction between these two characters, and ends up good in the end, of course. But what I remember about this comic was that I believe this was 8th grade. It might have been 7th grade. I brought this comic to school in a folder along with one or two others at that time. They were my favorite comics at that moment. And the moment being there was a planetary alignment. This sounds really stupid now. There was a planetary alignment, and there was some thought, some hubbub that I remember where people were saying that with all these planets in alignment, that it would destroy the Earth, right? Essentially, so or cause some catastrophic events on our planet. It sounds really dumb now that I'm talking about it. It's kind of embarrassing. But I took this comic and those two others with me to school just in case. Just in case the world did end, I wanted to have my favorite comic books with me. How big of a nerd was I? Right? Wow. Okay. Final three comics, but they're the big ones, and I've talked about this on the Longbox Review blog, longboxreview.com. These last three comics I'm going to talk about were the very first three comics that I bought with my own money, and I considered these the comics that got me started into reading and collecting comics. So what are they? So first of all, these are all Marvel titles, which is kind of strange because I ended up being more of a DC guy than Marvel. But these were this is the entryway. Now I'd read comics before that, of course, but for some reason these three at that time had such an impact on me that I never stopped reading nor collecting comics from that point. And I'm talking about, this was about, I believe, October or November of 1978. That's when I started reading these. And these are, first of all, Avengers, number 177. These Who Lay Dying is on the cover. Look at that. 35 cents. Still 35 cents. That's when I started collecting comics, was 35 centers. Let's see. Here's a Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man, number 98. This is a reprint of an Amazing Spider-Man issue where Gwen Stacy dies. So it's a reprint, but I was able to, that was my introduction to Spider-Man, essentially, was Gwen Stacy dying. Wow. And then also, speaking of Amazing Spider-Man, there we go, 187, Spider-Man versus Captain America, apparently, but you can see in the background there's Electro. There's some great art. Let's see, hold on a second. It's Pollard doing the cover, but who's doing? Jim Starlin and Bob McLeod doing finishes. So great art in this, and it's a really cool story too, where Electro has basically taken this boy hostage, and what Electro doesn't know is that the boy has the plague. Yes, in 1978, Marvel Universe, the plague is still around and in suburbia. But it pits Captain America against Spider-Man because no one's allowed to be in this area. For some, I can't remember why Spider-Man. Oh, Spider-Man's just there to get a story, to get some pics for the Bugle, and then he finds that Cap's there and or Shield's there, and so he decides to investigate as Spider-Man. Anyway, so a really fun issue. It's I think a good example of good one and done story that features a villain getting thwarted in his plot, and a great fight scene in between Cap and Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. So really good. You can kind of see. I don't know if you can kind of see this. Look at the spine. It's all rolled and the cover's wrinkled. It's a well-read, beloved issue. I believe I got a replacement copy. Try and stick it in the bag here. I believe I got a replacement copy, but I wanted to show you the original that got me into this. This Marvel Tales is a replacement copy. I don't know what happened to the original one. I much like the Amazing Spider-Man issue, I probably read this one to death. So I got a replacement copy because I really wanted to. I tried to get the original Amazing Spider-Man issue that this is a reprint of, and that was just too expensive. So, but this is the one where the Green Goblin captures Gwen Stacy. Goblin knows that Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same, Anyway, Goblin knocks Gwen Stacy off of the top of a bridge, and Spider-Man shoots his webbing down to try and save her. And there's this great panel where Spider-Man's webbing captures Gwen, sticks to her leg, captures her leg, and then look at the bottom there where her head is. Just that snap. Oh man, that just killed me back then. It's like the hero is not supposed to screw up, or he's not supposed to fail. And Spider-Man did, and it's like, holy crap, what am I reading? And a grand battle between Spider-Man and Green Goblin in this issue, especially since Peter Parker has the flu. I think he's battling that and all this stuff, and it was just an amazing issue. Who did this? This was written by Jerry Conway, one of the greats. Gil Kane is the artist, and John Romita and Tony Mortellero doing the inking. So I know everybody there except for Tony, but great comic, great comic. Of course, I wanted to read the second part of this, so I spent years trying to find Marvel Tales number 99, and it was only within the last 5 years that I got to read that issue. It's kind of a letdown, but I guess that's what happens when you build something up in your head, as I tend to do. And then finally, go back to the one I first showed you, Avengers number 177. This is the end, I think, of the Korvac saga, and this is in trade. I found out where you can go read that. But there's this guy called Korvac, and he has the power cosmic, and the Avengers are trying to stop him. So he's in before he gets Korvac, before he gets transformed into the guy with cosmic powers. He's in again suburbia. There's a thread there, I think. Weird how that happens. But the Avengers show up to try and stop him because he's a huge threat, and maybe a threat to the planet. I don't remember really why they're there, why they think they have to stop him. But maybe that has to do with the stuff that came before, which I've never actually read. I probably should go buy that trade paperback that I mentioned, figure out why Korvac was such a baddie in this issue. Anyway, there's just basically the whole issue is this big fight scene. Oh, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the original Guardians of the Galaxy show up in this as well, and that's where this is. I discovered them in this title, in this issue, and that's where I fell in love with them. Nikki and what's Charlie 13, I think is Charlie 7. I can't remember now. And a bunch of the others, the guy with the bow, with the fin coming down his head. Anyway, so the Avengers fight Korvac, and they lose. Almost all of them end up actually dead, or they're dying by the end of this issue. And it's only because of a Deus Ex Machina, because of Korvac's girlfriend, whose name I forget. She kind of rejects him and what he's doing, and they basically fight against each other and destroy each other, but not before the dying act of, I believe it's Korvac, who helps restore the dead Avengers and allow the ones that are dying not to die very soon. But as you can see here on the cover, you got Dr. Donald Blake, Thor's alter ego, trying to save and heal the remaining Avengers. So again, it's like, no wonder I see why everybody from the 60s with Marvel Comics thinks that Marvel is so great as in compared to DC at that time. They just told stories that you didn't normally see at other companies, or at the other company, the distinguished competition. Where these heroes fail like Spider-Man did with Gwen Stacy, fail in their mission, fail to do what they needed to do, but yet they're saved in the end so they can continue on doing it. Great stuff. These 3 comics, like I said, they got me on my path. They got me doing comics, and eventually blogging about comics, doing a podcast about comics. Just because I love comics so much, I just want to talk about them at you and with you. That'd be great. So that's it. That's all I had to talk about. Like I said, I was listening to that interview with Jim Lee, and I got flooded with all these thoughts and memories, and associated with those particular comics. Let me know what you think about it. Have any comments? What are the comics in your life that had an impact on you, or you have these really strong memories about, or related to those particular issues? I'd love to hear about what you have to say about this. I guess that's it. I will talk to you some other time.